Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and whatever time zone it is, wherever you're in the world, it is your Lore Saviour from a slightly different camera angle, purely because I have set up for tonight's game and I'm too lazy to reorganise it, so we're going to have to do with this for now, and me forget occasionally that the camera is up there, not attached to my laptop, which is currently at this angle right there. In the previous recap campaign diary thing, our players did a whole bunch of exciting and spicy things in Elysium, the newest Elysium hotspot, the Abyss, the club that's owned by Lasombra player. But this time, each of the three vampires went off and did slightly different things. When I say slightly different things, I mean they did very different things. And the session in itself was interesting, just like going around the virtual table and back up again. Catching them up on their different progresses and whatnot. So when I describe the scene about what each player did, it's not going to feel like they actually did a lot. But, a lot can happen in a short amount of time when you keep things in mind like that. So to start off, we're going to have a look at Brujah player. Now, as you may remember, the Brujah player was going to the University of Chicago as part of Critias's educational seminar thingies, because Kevin Jackson have put him in there along with the rest of the neonates who know next to nothing. And there's a whole bunch of political reasons as to why this is, but you can check out the previous campaign diaries to learn more. Now, it was a very interesting time for the Brujah player because it was part of their character's backstory, at least part of the story when we inserted it immediately after the last session. This is the university that the Brujah player had, honed their craft as a reporter, so that provided some very interesting role-playing opportunities and exploring some of their more emotional side and things, because it's sort of been very closed off to how they felt about things, because they've been very focused on the mission, and clearly they've been distressed about their stalker and their missing sire. And the University of Chicago, as I mentioned in the previous campaign diary, is fucking huge, so there's all of that to consider. That, and a Brujah player doesn't exactly know how to interact with the mortals anymore. So not because they've got a low humanity, but it kind of makes sense when you spend a lot of your time in isolation interacting with a bunch of monsters who at best work on the memories of their humanity rather than their actual living experiences, so to speak. That presented an awkward conversation with somebody who, showed them the way, although that person was more focused on the fact that they were connected to Britain, and it just got a bit awkward and funny. Just prevented a bit of a light-hearted feel during this tense moment. So they were shown to the correct hall. They had to wait outside for a little bit, and the Brujah player was introduced to a Finnblood Nosferatu. There wasn't really much of a name exchange or anything, but the Finnblood was clearly very nervous. And some of you might be thinking, hold on, Finnblood Nosferatu, the Finnblood don't have clans in V5. Yes and no. The Finnbloods are presented as having no real clan, because, as that saying, all Finnbloods are caitiff, but not all caitiffs are Finnblood sort of thing. That's not necessarily true. You kind of need to consider the people who embrace them. So if a Nosferatu was to embrace a Finnblood, there would be some of that curse, for lack of a better phrase, in them. Or at least that's how I interpret things, just pinging a bit from some of the older editions. So you had this Nosferatu Finnblood, where clearly they were Nosferatu in nature. There's some fangs that pointed through. They looked a bit patchy, for lack of a better phrase. But they made it clear that they were a Finnblood, and they looked I don't remember how I described them. It wasn't like a burn victim, but they just looked a bit rough, a bit worse for wear, shall we say. So there's a little conversation about that. Then other vampires started to come in, and they entered this lecture hall where Critias just waffled on for hours about the very basics of vampire. And I didn't roleplay all of this, but I did kind of set a ground that Critias is a very powerful individual with his use of disciplines. It was a bit of a funny moment, but I'm not quite too sure how seriously they took the use of disciplines here. But in any case, they got the idea that Critias was old and knowledgeable. And part of this interaction here was, you may remember from the previous spoiler section of the last campaign diary, that Brujah was going to meet a Tzimisce who I called Cassidy. And I made the mistake of making them appear as a rather hot individual. Because I described them as tall, bulky, muscular. They were bald, and the spikes down the head or whatnot. Yeah, yeah. My queer players kind of liked that a lot, and I've made a dreadful mistake. Like, in all seriousness, it was fun. Like, seeing the comments afterwards talking about how they felt about the Zemitzi, how much they were engaging with it. It was nice that I was able to create a character that was engaging behind, first material. But, it was cool. And as I mentioned in the previous recap session thing, the Zemitzi was aware of the Brujah's sire, and now the Brujah has to do something in order, to, be reintroduced to their side, because the Zemitzi is aware of them. They were at the sacrifice, they didn't do the vote or whatever. Sure, the Brujah is sympathetic to the Anarch cause, but the Zemitzi knows them as somebody that belongs to the camp. It's like, why should I trust you with like a friend of mine sort of thing? Like, you've got to do something for me, you've got to prove your loyalty. And there's a bit of tense moment here. And at long last, the Brujah player now owes somebody a favour, and I have just the plan for that, which I'll talk about in the spoilers section. Next, we move on to the Lasombra player, and this is provide a lot of interesting role-playing stuff as well, because it started off with them in their club, overseeing everyone and whatnot, and they wanted to see if they recognised anybody. So I made them do a roll, and they recognised a neonate Lasombra by the name of Celia. I believe that's how it's pronounced anyway, in Chicago by night. She knows Spanish. Parents have something to do with like media, and the character's very interested in Oblivion, which I'm mentioning here because it's what I told the player, but it's also kind of what that the character has going for them, at least without spoiling particular aspects of the character. And, the Lasombra player was talking to Celia about all this and whatnot. And Celia, as presented in the book, was like very innocent, a bit nervous, like just trying to work things out. And the Lasombra player was actually surprisingly helpful here. Until like Celia had like found her own feet, she's offered them a job, she here being the Lasombra player. The Lasombra player has offered a job to the other Lasombra Celia to work at the Abyss to see if they can find like a footing to try and help themselves build a bit more comfortable and try and work out what they want in life, because Celia isn't that old of a vampire, like a couple of years at most. But of course, as I've edited the timeline of the sacrifice here, I'd say they're about the same age as the Brujah player. I can't remember if I made that point across, but if not, that's very going to be an interesting surprise for my players. So this conversation was broken up a little bit by the security dealing with somebody outside, like rummaging through their bins, like head first into their bins, like a very skinny individual with a beard, with a very terrible Scottish accent, I do have to say, looking for a gun. And this gun was like a magnum, and it had like runes and whatnot scribbled onto one end, and a cork shoved into the barrel. And the Lasombra player found that very interesting indeed, and they followed the individual for a little bit, and they turned into a wolf and ran off. The shape-shifting individual, skinny as he was and very kind of aggressive and whatnot, knew what the Lasombra was, referring to them as a leech. And those who know, I'll talk a bit more about that in the spoiler section, but having that interaction there has made the Lasombra player feel a bit on edge, as well as Celia herself, who seems a bit too innocent for her own good, sort of thing. Like, she's a Lasombra, they're not really interacting with each other, and she just turns up here and is as sweet as she is, like, what's up with that? And just seeing that conversation unfold in our little Discord server was honestly really cool. Just like, as the storyteller, I can't really interfere too much. I just sit back and watch from the outside. It makes me feel good that I'm portraying these characters in a very interesting and engaging way. And, this is the first proper chronicle that I've done that I hopefully plan to get to the end. Well, actually, the sacrifice was the first one I got to the end. But you know what I mean, this ongoing, evolving plot sort of thing. It makes me feel good at an ST that I'm making my players, feel, respected and enjoying it. And also safe as well, because not wanting to harm my players emotionally, physically, mentally is super important to me. We had that little mishap in an earlier session, but, generally speaking, everything's been very plain sailing. I hope it continues to be that way. And again, I'm just really happy that my friends, are enjoying it. And that scene with the Lasombra player, kind of ended with like a phone call from the Malkavian player. Now, I want you to keep that phone call in mind because that's going to come up in just a little bit as we now touch upon the Malkavian player. Now, Malkavian player had actually quite a lot going on, like emotional stuff you may remember from the previous session, and we weren't giving up the ghost here. That's a little pun there if you see what I did there. Now, I had no idea what to do with Malkavian player here because they didn't really have much of goals and ideas of what to do, which, you know what, that's totally fine. Like, the storyteller doesn't have to know every single facet of what's going on, and I actually urge and encourage STs and games masters, whatever, to plan too much, like plan like so many sessions in advance. Like, have a general idea of like what you want to happen, but expect your players to break every single expectation and embrace the chaos. So, if you don't know what's going on, just ask the player, what are you doing? What are you planning on doing? Which is exactly how I started with the Malkavian player. Before I get too involved with that, Malkavian player lost 1 point of humanity because dealing with their stains, you're supposed to do this at the end of each session, but I forget, so I start the beginning of each session, like talking about stains and whatnot. They incurred a stain for not listening to Mr. X, asking them, or rather demanding them to go and do these favours for me, and Malkavian player didn't. The stain remorse roll didn't go well, and now they're on Humanity 6, like the Lasombra player. So yeah, that's a thing now. But going back to the main story here, I asked the Malkavian player what they were doing, and they decided that they were going to look up for one of their circus friends, because remember, Malkavian player originally came from a circus, and I thought, okay, this is now we're going to introduce a plot idea, which I don't think I've mentioned on these campaign diaries before, but to give a quick synopsis of what happened, they sort of went down the rabbit hole and realised that said circus friend wasn't with the circus that they were at moments ago, and they had to go through really obscure places to find it. And long story short, this touchstone of theirs, who this individual is now part of the Midnight Circus. And if anybody knows anything about the Midnight Circus, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of fun and pain for this individual. They did a premonition to see what was going on with them, and they found out that their touchstone is being tortured and being left in a cage and whatnot. Because the Midnight Circus ain't a fun place. It really isn't a fun place. So because of that, they had to incur another stain, which I'll have to resolve at the beginning of the next session, which is going to be interesting to see how that pans out, because if they lose another dot of humanity, not caring about their friend as much, that's going to create some really interesting drama. It also kind of puts in the question here of how flawed the remorse system is for V5, because, they care for this individual, and if they lose their point of humanity, it implies they don't care as much for them anymore. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how all of that unfolds. So once the Malkavian player had done that, they then went to go and feed. And they, went feed in the city. And Malkavian player had been sitting around doing not a lot. And I kind of felt bad about that. So I then decided on the moment to decide, you know what, fuck it, let's introduce that cop investigator contact of theirs, the one that's been stalking them, that's the one that got away sort of thing. This was very much on the spur of the moment sort of thing. The contact now knows that they're a vampire because they took pictures, and I didn't expect this situation to unravel the way that it did, because the Malkavian player knows cloud memory. I was expecting some dominate usage there, like you forgotten this face, you haven't done anything, and just take the camera away, but they didn't at all, because what actually happened, there was a bit of a chase sequence involved, because this cop fella is desperate, is aware that the Malkavian player's data and whatnot have been wiped out of existence, that a new mask has been put into place. Essentially their whole existence has been rewritten. There's this chase sequence involved, the Malkavian player pretending that the cop individual had hurt them and cut their arm, which summons two people that gave chase. Well, one stayed around with the Malkavian, and the Malkavian ran away from them. Rolls went kind of badly for the Malkavian player here, and well for the cop person, because the cop person shot the person that was running after them, and they managed to escape. The person that the cop person shot died, But the cop person was caught by other police officers because the one who found the Malkavian player, called for the ambulance and police. And of course, they all showed up within minutes. So, cop individual had been arrested, has now been taken to one of Chicago's many police departments. But it also means that the Malkavian player is now being taken with them, for questioning to be given a statement. And also, that camera that the police person had, the investigator, is now being taken in as evidence, which is a masquerade breach. Because even if they don't believe that cop individual, that camera is going to have some very incriminating evidence about what is going on. And then the Malkavian player gave a phone call to the Lasombra. See, I told you that phone call would come up. To come to the police department, the specific one, and help them with that. And that is where the session ended. And I believe the Brujah player got pulled into this as well. But at least they were talking about it on the server afterwards. And I can't really talk much more about my plans afterwards without going into some spoiler territory. So, players, you're seeing the spoiler thing now. Anybody else who doesn't want spoilers for the next session could fuck off as well. Check out the various links in the description below to purchase various different books that I'm using the special affiliate links where if you purchase those books with those links, I get some of the money back. With no extra cost, I can continue doing lore dives, character creation guides, and all that fun stuff that you want, as well as the various social media pages that I'm using. I will point out here that I am no longer using Twitter. You will find a link to Blue Sky, which is honestly Twitter but better. It's actually founded by the people who made Twitter. This isn't sponsored or anything. This is just me giving you a little information up-to-date thing. So check out the links in the description below, and I'll see you elsewhere. And for everybody else who's hanging around for the spoiler section, let's get on with it. So I think it's fair to say that the players are going to be focusing on getting that camera and possibly the memory card or SD card back as soon as possible. That's going to take up like most of the session, I think, or at least a good chunk of it. And they were talking in our little Discord server about like doing this, that, and the other, and coming up with different ideas and things that they could do. Which I love. I love the enthusiasm here, and like going back to what I was saying earlier on, it's making me happy that the players are really engaged with the story and like having lots of fun. Unfortunately for them, unbeknownst to them, or at least most of them, my partners should remember this. I binge watch lots of like US like crime interrogation sort of stuff and analysis. So like YouTube channels like Jim Can't Swim, Psychology, and Earwoo Explore With Us that like really go into like the whole criminal psychology elements of each like different investigation sort of thing and interrogations. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's given me a general idea about how tight a lot of the like police security is, or a lot of these things, and how very quickly they can work things out, generally speaking. So they're going to pick up very quickly that the Malkavian player, just from the nature of what's happening, that something seems amiss here. And they're not going to be able to get that camera back as easily as they think they can do, like, because they're going to get clearance. Basically, if they're not a cop, they're not getting anywhere near that camera. And I don't think they've worked out that that camera is, like, evidence. Like, they are not getting that back. Regardless to who the camera belongs to, whether it belongs to the cop or the Malkavian, as they're saying that it is, or they will say that it is, rather, they are not getting that camera back. Like, that is gone. And I don't think the Lasombra player is going to be able to be that helpful, because one of the ideas that was thrown about that they're going to pretend to be like a lawyer, which that's going to get really spicy very quickly. And there's also the fact that the police in Chicago, like ruled by Kevin Jackson, the prince. Previously it was Loden. So if they interfered too much, Kevin Jackson is going to come down on them fucking hard, which is going to be very, very exciting. Now, the easiest thing that the players can do, because I believe Brujah player has a burner phone to get in contact with Damien, but even if they don't, Damien owns Brujah player a boon, and I think the boon can be used here to help clean this mess up. But we'll see what they do here. But I cannot plan for any of this because, you know, the ideas that are being thrown about and whatever, and just how crazy that these lot are when they put their heads together. I don't think there's anything I can do that can properly plan for it, other than just keeping in mind just how difficult every single step of the way this is going to be. Because even if they do manage to use Dominate all the way through, all that shit is going to be picked up on cameras. The Lasombra is going to appear as a complete mess on cameras because of the whole technology thing Bane that the Lasombra has. And, you know, even with the investigator do like flapping his lips all about, it's like, I'm telling you, vampires are real. There's going to be like one person there who's going to be a bit curious and like doing a bit of investigating. So at the very least, I know how I'm bringing hunters into Chicago now. Well done, players, for doing all my work for me. So yeah, that's going to be... I'm super excited for the game just for that alone, because I want to see what chaos falls, you know, what happens next. As we're talking about chaos, let's talk about the Anarchs with the Brujah player. Like, what am I going to do with them? Well, I was thinking about it the other day, and I don't think the Brujah player is going to do anything like too violent at this stage, because this is the kind of the idea that I have with the Tzimisce here, that they're just very muscular, bulky. They're very like a little aggressive in places as well, at least in the limited confines of the conversation they were having in the university lecture hall. And how about we introduce some of the police here? How about we piss off Kevin Jackson a bit more? How about we have a rescue mission where this Anarch pack, because remember, the proper name for an Anarch coterie is a pack, which you can find out if you read the revised guide to the revised guide to the Anarchs, not the Camarilla, which I'm actually going to leave in the description below, as long as the other two revised player guides, sect guides, whatever, because they're very good books. I've reviewed all of them, so check out those as well. But regardless, it can be a rescue mission where the Brujah doesn't get involved with any of the more violent elements of it, but they get to witness it, just to make them think, do they really want to be associated with the Anarchs if this is what they're like? And it also gives the Brujah player an opportunity to flaunt their disciplines, which to this date of this recording, the Brujah player has not used a single discipline power. I have my reasons for why that might be. I shan't voice them at this point, but I want to see how they can use their disciplines here, because that's kind of how they're going to be able to get out of this in one piece smoothly, I reckon. So yeah, this is going to be some sort of rescue mission of the Tzimisce's pack, Anarch, coterie, whatever, rescuing somebody that's in prison. Well, not in prison, in jail sort of thing. They're going to break him out, which is going to create a whole load of mayhem, which at the same time is also going to introduce more hunters. So even if the players are super, super clever with getting that camera back, and they manage to, even if they get Damien on board, we're bringing in those hunters in. Like, one way or another, those hunters are coming in. It just depends how many of those hunters are coming in and how aggressive they are going to be. So again, lots of fun and excitement stuff. So actually, this might also be the first time that the players may actually get harmed with combat as well. So that's going to be very exciting indeed. Now, finally, the Lasombra player. They still need to do all that stuff with Gabriella. So depending on how the session progresses, and how involved the entire coterie is, we may move on to the following night where they interact with Gabriella. I also need to think about what the other players are going to do here, particularly the Malkavian. But you know, the players are going to suggest ideas and whatnot, which is going to dictate the direction things go, which is why I don't get too worried about like planning lots of things, because, you know, as I mentioned in previous campaign diaries, I have like lots of different ideas planned. It's just finding appropriate moments to drop them, and also the players are going to completely ransack any sort of direction that I give them. So I'm just going with the wind, just going whatever what they're doing. But with the Lasombra player, they're driving down. They're going to be driving down to help the Malkavian player out, and this is where I'm going to introduce that player's stalker, because they actually have the stalker background. This is going to be the Hecate, in case you haven't forgotten. They're going to be following them along in a nice car, and they're going to be stalking them the entire duration of, the car journey there, or unless the player decides to, like, deliberately throw them off. But they're going to keep coming up over the next coming nights. And if they decide to flaunt their money here with the police, this is going to be the moment where all of their money just disappears. Like, the card's not going to be accepted or whatever, like it's going to be gone, which is like, this is the Horatio Ballard stuff I've mentioned in previous campaign diaries, just to really fuck with them, because if they go and think, oh, I'll just like buy my way through this or whatever, then nah, fuck you. No, it's not going to be like that, but it's like, as I said, I wanted to try and introduce this idea with Gabriella, but hey, if something comes up sooner, then that's where we're going to drop it. It's like whether it's dramatically appropriate or inappropriate, depending on who you ask. Now, there's also the bit with Celia, the Lasombra. And to be totally honest, when the players said they wanted to see if there was anybody around the club that they recognised, they've done this a couple of times in the last couple of sessions, and the last time I said, like, no, other than Crook or whatever, i.e. when people have come to them. And, I didn't want to, like, deny them of having that conversation a third time, so when I made them do, like, the wits and awareness well, or whatever I got them to do, I quickly just opened up a random page on Chicago by Night. It was literally embracing the chaos, and it just landed on Celia. I'm pointing there because I've got you could see there's a desk here where I had Chicago by Night. And I opened up on a random page, and there was Celia's portrait, and then I just quickly read, what I needed to know about her. The player was giving me their results, and they gave some background information, and the conversation just unfolded from there, and that's where a lot of the suspicion happened. And then being an employee to them is going to create some very interesting things indeed. Now, when I said earlier on there was things about the character I didn't want to spoil, it was honestly just one point, because, and as I said, this is completely coincidental. Helena, Portia, has an interest in them, which, given Portia's ties to the Brujah player currently, there's going to be some potential drama there. And what I'm thinking here is that Celia has some understanding with media corporations because of their parents and part of the backstory there. And I think as part of that in a modern era setting, that they would know a fair amount about social media and marketing. Now, obviously, the Lasombra player is going to be limited in the capacity of using like digital software and computers and whatnot, but at least she would have the knowledge to hire people to like do social media stuff, which would build the club's reputation, which may make it seem more popular than the Succubus Club, which would piss off Portia, because the Succubus Club for like decades has been like the shit in Chicago, at least for the vampire populace. So that, over time, I feel could create some very interesting scenarios where the players begin to work out that actually Portia is not a Chimere. They are not a neonate. They're certainly not a neonate. But there's lots of drama and things that can happen there, and it just makes them think, who the hell is Portia? How are they so powerful? Like, what are they going to do? Like, there's lots of opportunity to, like, hitmen, attacks and whatever, and there's also the Sabbats related stuff, and there's also the fact with the werewolf. Yes, the person that was in the bin was a werewolf. They were a bone Nora. 2 out of the 3 players worked that out pretty quickly. Now, I haven't denied or confirmed this. I just said, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, like the runes on the gun, it like identifies the gun as a fetish, and I'm very glad the player didn't attempt to use the gun or grabbed it by the handle or whatever, because they would have got a nasty shock. There's an image in the Glass Walker's revised tribe book where it takes up a full page, I think. Like somebody's holding a gun and like lightning is shooting out of it, or lightning's going into it. I believe the gun was upside down. I just thought that was a really cool idea. Now, I don't know if that was an actual fetish or just like an example. Oh, the Glass Walkers make fetishes out of like really unusual things. But I kind of liked that idea, so that's what I've kept there. So yeah, we've introduced the idea of the guru here in Chicago, this Bone Nora, or whatever I just called them. I think I called them Bone Nora, but regardless. So we're going to be like feeding bits of it in there now, because the Bone Nora now knows that this club is run by a Lasombra, and there's vampire presence this down south. And again, I need to try and work out how to bring the rest of the group in here, because I don't want to go Black Spiral Dancers Go. Like, we're introducing bits and pieces along the way, and that's going to time with the Sabbat stuff, as I've mentioned stuff before. But so many different ideas, and none of it's really organised, because that's not really how I organise my notes. I do a bit of revision and reading when needed, and if I'm thrown off course, I just grab open the book at a random page, apparently. But yeah, this is just kind of how I do things, because you can't really plan for what the players do. You can have some general ideas, but you kind of need to go in the direction that they're going, especially when you've got something like this where I've got no real goal in mind. But yeah, I'm just super pumped to start playing again. And when I do run that session, I'm obviously going to talk about it again, which you can find out at a later point. So if you've enjoyed this campaign diary, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Check out the various links in the description below. Purchase the books using those links, which are affiliate links, so I get some of the money back to provide more books for lore dives and whatnot. Follow me on the various social media platforms, Instagram, Blue Sky, and join the Lore by Night Discord server for all things Lore by Night. And it's been also really nice reading the comments for these, as few as they have been, just people enjoying these campaign dies and what we've been getting up to, which it kind of makes me feel rather welcome at the moment, which, given certain things that happened on social media recently, part of it's my fault, admittedly, and lies told by a particularly large person in the community, it's good to know that, that you still enjoy my stuff, and it's encouraging me just not to throw in the towel because a few people throw a hissy fit online. But anyway, enough of the shit. Buy the good shit below and subscribe to the good shit on the Lore by Night channel. And until next time, farewell.